The atmosphere inside the upscale restaurant was electric with energy. It was one of those places where you could feel the buzz of important conversations and the faint clinking of fine china in the background. The soft hum of classical music floated through the air, adding a touch of sophistication to the evening. The space was dimly lit with ambient lighting highlighting the luxurious decor. At the far corner of the room, near a window with a view of the bustling city streets, a significant business dinner was taking place. The man seated at the head of the table was a billionaire, renowned for his sharp business instincts and financial acumen. His reputation in the corporate world was larger than life, and tonight, he was surrounded by some of the most influential people in the industry, investors, executives, and advisors who were all there to discuss a deal worth a staggering $100 million. The deal was the culmination of months of negotiations, strategies, and intense discussions. To most, it was a mere formality now. Just a few signatures and a handshake, and the deal would be sealed. But for the billionaire, it was more than that. It was a testament to his success, his ability to predict market trends, and his unrivaled skill at making the right investments at the right time. Everything seemed to be going perfectly according to plan. He sat at the table with a look of quiet confidence. His tailored suit fit him like it was custom-made, and he exuded an air of self-assurance that made everyone around him listen closely when he spoke. The other members of the group were hanging on his every word, nodding in agreement as he outlined the final stages of the deal. To the outside observer, everything seemed flawless. The investors were eager, the money was ready to be transferred, and the billionaire was about to walk away from the table with another victory under his belt. Meanwhile, a young woman moved quietly between the tables, making sure that the guests had everything they needed. She was a waitress at the restaurant, one of the many employees who worked behind the scenes to ensure that everything ran smoothly. Her name was not important to the people around her. She was just another part of the restaurant's polished staff, trained to be efficient, polite, and unobtrusive. But she wasn't just another waitress. She had a mind that many would never have guessed simply by looking at her. While the billionaire and his associates were immersed in their high-stakes conversation, the young woman's attention was elsewhere. She was carefully observing the documents spread out on the table in front of them. As part of her job, she had learned to pay attention to detail. It was something that came naturally to her. And as her eyes skimmed over the numbers, something caught her attention. Something wasn't right. It was a small mistake at first glance, a formula that didn't add up correctly. But the more she looked at it, the more she realized just how significant the error was. It was a calculation mistake, a discrepancy that could cause the deal to fail. She wasn't someone who had formal education in finance or accounting, but the knowledge she had gained came from years of hard work, watching her mother struggle with money and teaching herself the basics of budgeting and math to help her family. Her heart raced as she stared at the document. Could this be real? Could a mistake like this have been overlooked by everyone else in the room? By the billionaire? By his team of advisors? By the high-powered executives who sat around him? The thought seemed almost impossible. How could such a simple error slip past so many sharp minds? The waitress shifted uncomfortably. She wasn't sure what to do. She had seen these kinds of mistakes before, but never in a situation like this. The stakes were so much higher now. This wasn't just some small transaction. This was a $100 million deal. She felt a twinge of doubt. Who was she to challenge someone like him? He was a billionaire, a man who had built an empire. He had all the credentials, all the qualifications. What could a waitress, someone with no formal training, possibly know about the financial world? And yet the mistake was glaring at her. The more she looked at the numbers, the more she realized that she couldn't let it go. She knew that if she didn't say something, this deal could collapse. The ripple effect of such a mistake could cause years of damage. She wasn't just a waitress in this moment. She was someone who had seen enough, someone who had learned the value of knowledge and the importance of speaking up, even when it was difficult. Her mind raced as she considered the possibility of speaking up. What if they laughed at her? What if they dismissed her without a second thought? It wasn't like she had any power in the room, but the weight of the situation hung heavily on her shoulders, and she knew deep down that she couldn't stay silent. If she kept quiet, the mistake might go unnoticed and the deal would go through. But the consequences would be disastrous. She glanced around the room, taking in the expressions of the businessmen all deep in conversation. They were so focused on the final details, so confident in their knowledge, it seemed almost impossible that any of them could be wrong. But the numbers on the page told a different story. Her pulse quickened. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was about to come. In her mind, she ran through the words she would say. She knew she had to be careful. Too bold and they might dismiss her outright. Too timid, and they might not take her seriously. With a quiet sigh, she walked toward the table, her footsteps soft on the polished floor. The waiters and staff moved briskly around her, but she kept her focus. The billionaire was still speaking, his voice low but commanding. He didn't notice her approach until she was standing beside him. When he finally looked up, she hesitated for a moment, but then the words came out before she could stop them. "That's the wrong formula," she whispered, her voice steady but low. The room fell into an almost eerie silence. The billionaire, caught off guard, looked up at her, confusion flashing in his eyes. He hadn't expected someone like her to say anything. After all, she was just a waitress, a mere employee in the grand scheme of things. But there was something about her tone, something about the way she spoke that made him pause. He stared at her for a moment, taking in her calm demeanor. She wasn't flustered. She wasn't nervous. She simply stood there waiting for him to respond. The room was still. The executives and investors at the table exchanged glances, unsure of how to react. The billionaire blinked a few times, processing what she had just said. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice laced with curiosity. He didn't believe it, not for a second. But something in her eyes made him want to hear her out, and with that, the game had changed. The billionaire sat back in his chair, staring at the young waitress who had dared to speak up. The room had grown quiet, the energy in the air shifting from the confident buzz of a deal nearing completion to a palpable tension. No one in the room knew what to do next. The billionaire had been caught off guard by her words. His business mind raced, but it was clear that his pride had been pricked. For a brief moment, he wondered if he had misunderstood her. Perhaps in the chaos of his successful career, he had misread the situation. But no, she was too calm. There was no hesitation in her voice, no sign that she was unsure of what she was saying. She had whispered her words as though she was stating an undeniable fact, one that would be proven true in time. He took a slow breath, his fingers tapping the table as he weighed his options. He could ignore her, dismiss the comment, and continue with his plans. But something in his gut told him that doing so might be a mistake. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone in her position. He had built his empire by trusting his instincts and surrounding himself with experts. Yet this young woman, who was simply here to serve dinner, was suggesting that his calculations were flawed. He raised an eyebrow, still unsure whether to take her seriously. "Explain," he said simply, his voice cool but filled with an undercurrent of curiosity. The waitress, who had been nervous just moments ago, found herself at a crossroads. She hadn't expected to be asked to explain herself. In fact, she hadn't expected to be acknowledged at all. She thought she might say her piece and then quietly retreat to her duties. But now all eyes were on her. The billionaire's gaze was piercing, but there was an openness in it, a hint of genuine curiosity that she hadn't anticipated. She stood straighter, her nerves slowly dissolving as she gathered her thoughts. She had always been good at analyzing numbers, at seeing patterns others missed. And now here she was, about to do what she had always dreamed of, using her skills to help someone who truly needed it. "Well," she began, her voice steady, "the issue is with the formula you're using to calculate the projected returns. If you look closely, the rate of growth you've applied is too high for the initial investment. It doesn't account for market fluctuations properly, and you're assuming a linear progression when in reality, the returns will be more erratic." She paused, making sure her words were sinking in. The billionaire had a skeptical look on his face, but she noticed that the other people around the table were now listening more intently. "You've projected a 20% return for the first 2 quarters, but if the market changes even slightly, the risk could cause a significant drop. It's a subtle shift in the formula, but it can cause the whole deal to fall apart." The more she spoke, the more the billionaire's expression changed. He leaned forward slightly, his fingers still resting on the table but now tapping more slowly. She could see that he was processing her words, taking them seriously, and that made her feel more confident. She wasn't just speaking into the void. Someone was listening. The investors at the table exchanged glances, their faces a mix of disbelief and intrigue. Some of them clearly didn't understand the intricacies of the issue, while others were starting to wonder if this young waitress might be onto something. The tension in the air thickened as the billionaire remained silent, his sharp mind turning over the numbers she had pointed out. "I'm not saying you've made a huge mistake," the waitress continued, feeling the weight of the moment pressing on her shoulders. "I'm just saying that the current formula isn't as accurate as it needs to be. It's risky, and the numbers could mislead you." The billionaire nodded slowly, his lips pressing together in thought. "I see, and how do you suggest we correct it?" His voice was now less guarded, as if he was genuinely interested in what she had to say. The waitress took a deep breath, grateful for the chance to explain further. "Well, you could adjust the growth rate to more closely match historical trends, and then apply a risk factor to account for market volatility. It would give you a more conservative projection, but it would also protect you from the downside risk." She felt a strange mix of pride and anxiety as she laid out her recommendation. She had never expected that she would be in a position to offer financial advice to a billionaire, let alone be taken seriously. Yet here she was, speaking as though she were one of the top analysts at the table. The billionaire was still silent, his brow furrowed in concentration. But then, without warning, he leaned back in his chair and let out a small chuckle. The sound was unexpected, soft and warm, almost disarming. "You know," he said, "you've got guts. I'll give you that." The waitress didn't know what to say. She wasn't looking for compliments, she just wanted to help. But the billionaire's words seemed to put her at ease. He wasn't dismissing her. In fact, he seemed to be taking her seriously. "How about we take a look at your number?" he suggested. "We've got a few analysts who can run the recalculations. Let's see if what you're saying holds up." Relieved that he hadn't brushed her off, the waitress nodded. She was still nervous, but now there was a sense of excitement building inside her. This wasn't just a chance to correct a mistake. It was a moment that could change everything for her. She had worked in the background for so long, watching others make decisions and take the credit. But now she had the chance to be heard, to prove that she was more than just someone who served food. The billionaire motioned to his team, instructing them to pull up the numbers again and adjust the formula. The room was still, the air thick with anticipation as the analysts got to work. The waitress felt a sense of pride that she had been the one to catch the mistake. But she couldn't help feeling a little out of place in this world of high-powered executives and million-dollar decisions. For a brief moment, she thought back to her own journey. How she had started from humble beginnings, working odd jobs to support her family, studying accounting in the evenings when she could barely keep her eyes open from exhaustion. The path to this moment hadn't been easy, and there had been times when she had wondered if she would ever get a break. But now, standing in this room with the billionaire and his team, she felt like she was finally being recognized for her skills. She tried to keep her focus as the analysts worked through the numbers, but her mind wandered to the future. What would happen if the billionaire accepted her suggestions? Would this lead to something bigger? A new career? A chance to leave behind the restaurant and work in the world of finance? As the minutes passed, the tension in the room started to lift. The billionaire was still deep in thought, but he wasn't looking at her with skepticism anymore. Instead, there was a look of respect in his eyes, and that made everything worth it. Finally, after what seemed like hours, one of the analysts looked up and nodded. "You were right," he said. "The initial formula was off. With the adjustments you've suggested, the projections are much more accurate." The billionaire smiled, a rare look of genuine appreciation on his face. "Well, I'll be damned. You've saved us from a huge mistake." He turned to the waitress, his voice more relaxed now. "You've got a sharp mind. I'd like to talk to you more about this." The room, once filled with doubt, was now buzzing with a sense of accomplishment. The deal would proceed, but with the corrections made, the risk had been mitigated. The billionaire looked at the waitress, who stood silently at the edge of the table, as if still unsure that what had just happened was real. And then, just as the conversation turned to the next steps in the deal, the billionaire spoke again, his voice soft but clear. "You know," he said, "there's a lot more potential in you than just being a waitress. I think you might be able to do something much bigger." The next few minutes passed in a blur for the waitress. The billion-dollar deal that had been on the verge of disaster was now back on track, thanks to her quick thinking. As the team continued to adjust the numbers, She couldn't help but feel a sense of pride growing inside her. She had done something that no one had expected her to do. The thought that she had contributed in such a meaningful way filled her with excitement. But just as quickly as the high from the moment began, a sense of nervousness crept in. She hadn't expected to be noticed, let alone praised. The billionaire had asked her to stay for a moment to talk, and now she felt unsure of how to handle this next step. The billionaire leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping gently on the table. He looked deep in thought, his gaze flicking between the documents and the waitress standing nearby. She felt a little out of place in her uniform, surrounded by the polished, well-dressed executives who were all still processing what had just happened. They were now openly discussing the changes she had suggested, impressed by how accurate her analysis had turned out to be. "Thank you for pointing that out," the billionaire said, finally breaking the silence. His voice was calm, but there was a genuine appreciation in it. "You've helped us avoid a huge mistake. I won't forget this." She wasn't sure how to respond. She hadn't done it for recognition or praise. She had just seen something that didn't add up and felt she had to act. She nodded, unsure of what else to say, but the billionaire wasn't done with her yet. "I've got to be honest," he continued, a slight smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "I never expected a waitress to catch something like this. It's rare to find someone with your attention to detail, your ability to see the bigger picture." The words stung a little, but not in the way she might have expected. She wasn't offended. Instead, they felt like a recognition of something she had been trying to prove for years. She wasn't just a waitress. She wasn't defined by the job she held, and she hadn't chosen it because she didn't have options. She had chosen it because it was the best she could do at the time. But now, she felt like she had a chance to do more. "I've been studying finance for a while," she said quietly, her voice tinged with a mixture of shyness and pride. "I've always been interested in numbers. I never thought I'd get the chance to work in a field like this, though." The billionaire raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Studying finance? That's impressive. Where did you study? Who's teaching you?" She smiled a little, her fingers nervously twisting the edge of her apron. "I mostly teach myself. I read books, watch online courses, and try to learn whatever I can during my free time." The billionaire nodded slowly, clearly impressed by her self-motivation. There was a quiet respect in his eyes, one that made her feel like she wasn't just another face in the crowd. He had taken notice of her in a way that few people had. He wasn't simply appreciating her for catching a mistake. He was beginning to see her as someone with potential, someone who had more to offer than what she appeared to be. "I've seen a lot of people with degrees and fancy titles," he said after a pause, "but not many have the kind of drive that you do. People like you are hard to find. It takes a different kind of mindset to be able to see things that others miss." She wasn't sure how to react. She had always worked hard to improve herself, but she didn't think anyone would ever take her seriously in a world that seemed so far out of reach. But here was this billionaire, someone who had achieved more than she could ever imagine, telling her that her drive was something special. "You could go far with that kind of attitude," he continued, leaning forward in his chair. "I'm not saying you have to leave your job, but there's no reason you couldn't do something more. You could work in finance. I've seen what you're capable of." Her heart skipped a beat. Was he suggesting that she could work in finance? That she could leave her job as a waitress and start something new? The thought was almost too overwhelming to process. "I'm not sure I could leave this behind," she said, looking down at her apron. "I've got a lot of responsibilities. My family depends on me." The billionaire leaned back again, considering her words. "I understand," he said gently. "But you've got a chance here, and I'd be happy to help. We could talk to some of the people I work with. See if there's a role for you, something more than just serving food." Her mind raced. Was he serious? Could this really be the opportunity she had been waiting for? It wasn't a straightforward offer, but it was something. The thought of stepping out of her current life, of taking a leap into the unknown, filled her with both fear and excitement. She wasn't sure she was ready for it, but she also knew that if she didn't take a chance, she might never get another one. "I don't know what to say," she admitted quietly. "I've always wanted something more. But I never thought it would be possible." The billionaire gave her a small smile. "The best opportunities often come when you least expect them, but they only come if you're willing to take a risk. You've already shown that you're capable. All you have to do now is decide if you're ready to make a change." She thought about it for a long moment, the weight of the decision pressing on her. She had always dreamed of a life where she could do more than just get by, where she could be recognized for her skills and abilities. But was she ready to take that step? Could she leave behind the familiar, the safety of her current life and dive into something so uncertain? The more she thought about it, the more she realized that she couldn't stay where she was forever. She had worked hard for so long and she knew she had more to offer. The question was whether she had the courage to step into the unknown and take that first leap. The billionaire seemed to sense her hesitation. He didn't pressure her, but instead gave her the space to think. "Take your time," he said. "There's no rush. Think about it. If you're interested, let me know and we'll talk." She nodded slowly, feeling a mix of emotions. She wasn't ready to make any decisions yet, but the idea of a future that could be different was suddenly within reach. She had always been good at seeing opportunities where others might not, but now she realized the biggest opportunity of her life was standing right in front of her. She just had to take the first step. The following days felt like a blur. The waitress couldn't quite shake the conversation she had had with the billionaire. His words echoed in her mind as she went about her daily routine, still working her shifts at the upscale restaurant. Despite the sense of excitement and possibility, there was a lingering hesitation deep inside her. She had never imagined that a single conversation could shift the course of her life so drastically. She found herself replaying the moments over and over, each time feeling more conflicted about what to do. The offer was enticing, but the reality of leaving her current life behind was overwhelming. It wasn't just the security of her job or the routine she had grown accustomed to. She had responsibilities, a family to care for, and bills to pay. Stepping into an entirely new world, especially one so far removed from her current life, was terrifying. That evening, after finishing her shift and walking home, she sat on the edge of her bed, looking out the window at the city lights in the distance. The world felt far away, full of opportunities she had only ever dreamed of. She thought about the billionaire's words again. He had seen something in her that no one else had. He had recognized her potential. Her heart longed for something more, but her mind was weighed down by practicalities. Could she afford to risk it? Could she afford to make the leap into a world she wasn't familiar with? She had seen so many people fail, so many dreams dashed when reality came crashing down. The thought of failing terrified her. What if she wasn't good enough? What if she wasn't cut out for something bigger? The next day, she found herself staring at her phone, unsure whether to call the billionaire or not. The decision felt too big, too important. And yet something inside her told her that this was the moment to act. She had spent years hiding behind self-doubt, always thinking she wasn't ready, always thinking that someone else was better suited for the opportunities that passed her by. But now, for the first time in her life, she had a chance to change that, to take control of her own destiny. She took a deep breath and dialed the billionaire's number. Her fingers trembled slightly as she waited for him to answer. "Hello?" His voice sounded relaxed, as though he was in the middle of something casual. She had expected him to sound busy, maybe even impatient, but instead he sounded approachable. "Hi," she said, her voice slightly shaky. "It's me, the waitress from the restaurant. I've been thinking about what you said, and I think I'm ready to give it a shot." There was a brief silence on the other end, and then the billionaire's voice was back, filled with warmth. "I'm glad to hear that. I knew you'd come to the right decision." The waitress felt a flood of relief wash over her. Her decision had been made. She wasn't backing down anymore. She was ready to take the next step, whatever that might be. They agreed to meet the following day at his office. The thought of walking into a high-powered business environment, where the billionaires and CEOs roamed, made her stomach flutter with nerves. But this was the moment that could change everything for her. She couldn't let fear hold her back any longer. The next day she arrived at the office building, her heart pounding in her chest. The sleek, modern building stood tall in the heart of the city, a symbol of wealth and success. She had never been inside a place like this before. As she walked through the entrance, she felt like an imposter, surrounded by people in suits and high heels. Her dress, though professional, felt out of place in the polished corporate environment. But she had made it this far. She couldn't turn back now. She was led into a conference room where the billionaire was waiting. He greeted her with a smile, and for a moment she felt like she belonged. He made her feel at ease, as if she wasn't just some waitress, but someone who had the potential to make a real impact. "I'm glad you came," he said, gesturing for her to sit. "I've been looking forward to this conversation. She sat across from him, feeling a mix of excitement and nerves. "Thank you for giving me this chance. I know I'm not qualified the way others might be, but I'm willing to learn. I want to prove that I can do this." He nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "It's not about qualifications or degrees. It's about drive, passion, and a willingness to learn. You've already proven that you have what it takes. Now it's just a matter of putting it to use." They spent the next hour discussing potential opportunities. The billionaire outlined the types of roles that could be available, as well as the skills she would need to develop to succeed. He didn't sugarcoat things. He told her that the world she was about to enter was demanding, competitive, and often unforgiving. But he also said it was filled with opportunities for those who were willing to work hard and push through the challenges. As he spoke, she couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. The life she had once thought impossible was now within reach. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was someone with a future she could shape for herself. For the first time, she truly believed that she could have a seat at the table, not as a bystander, but as someone who could contribute and make a difference. When the meeting ended, the billionaire offered her a position with his team. It wasn't a top executive role, but it was a start, an entry point into the world she had always dreamed of. She would begin as an intern, learning the ropes, studying the financial strategies, and gaining first-hand experience. It wasn't glamorous, but it was her chance to prove herself. "I won't make any promises about what comes next," he said, standing up to shake her hand. "But I believe you've got the potential to go far. The rest is up to you." She walked out of the building that day with her heart racing and a sense of purpose she had never known before. The future was no longer something she feared. It was something she could control. She had taken the first step toward building the life she had always wanted. And though the road ahead was uncertain, she knew that she wasn't alone anymore. She had someone who believed in her, and more importantly, she had begun to believe in herself. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. She spent long hours at the office, learning everything she could. The work was demanding, and at times she felt like she was drowning in new information. But each day she grew stronger. Each task she completed, no matter how small, built her confidence. She had always been good with numbers, but now she was learning the intricacies of the financial world, the strategies, the risks, the rewards. She was seeing how things worked on a larger scale. There were moments when she doubted herself, when she felt like she was in over her head. But each time, she reminded herself of the opportunity she had been given. This wasn't just about the job, it was about her future. It was about proving to herself that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. As the weeks passed, the billionaire continued to check in with her, offering guidance and support. His mentorship meant more to her than she could ever express. He was patient, understanding, and always willing to offer a helping hand when she needed it. One afternoon, as she sat in the office reviewing financial reports, the phone rang. It was the billionaire. "Hello?" she answered, her heart racing slightly. "Just wanted to check in," he said, his tone casual but warm. "How are you doing?" "I'm doing well," she replied. "It's been a lot to take in, but I'm learning. Every day I feel more confident." "Good," he said, his voice filled with approval. "You're on the right track. Keep at it. I see big things ahead for you." She smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. She wasn't just living for the moment anymore. She was building a future, and she was just getting started. Months passed in a blur of hard work and learning. The waitress, now immersed in the fast-paced world of finance, found herself growing more confident each day. What had started as an unexpected opportunity had become a defining chapter of her life. She was no longer the woman who quietly observed from the sidelines. She was now a key player in a world she had once only dreamed of entering. The billionaire's words echoed in her mind as she worked. The best opportunities come when you least expect them. At times, she still couldn't believe that he had seen something in her, something that had pushed her to step out of her comfort zone and pursue a new future. Every task she tackled, every financial report she reviewed felt like another step toward realizing the potential he had seen in her. She was now in a position where she wasn't just following instructions. She was making decisions, offering suggestions, and contributing to high-level meetings. The first few weeks had been overwhelming, and there were moments when she doubted her ability to keep up. But slowly, the confusion and uncertainty started to fade, replaced by a growing understanding of the business world. Her colleagues, Initially skeptical about her lack of formal experience, had begun to respect her. They saw her dedication, her willingness to ask questions, and her ability to think critically. It wasn't long before she earned their trust, and some of them even started turning to her for advice on financial strategies. The thought that someone might value her input still amazed her, but it also motivated her to work harder. Despite the progress she had made, there were still moments of doubt. She often wondered if she truly belonged in this new world. Was she just a temporary exception, someone who had caught the billionaire's attention but would eventually fade into the background? These thoughts lingered, especially when she looked around at the other team members, most of whom had years of experience in finance. They were the experts, the ones with the degrees and credentials, and yet she was here side by side with them, making her mark. One evening, after a particularly long day at the office, the billionaire asked her to stay behind for a meeting. She had grown used to these one-on-one sessions with him, where they discussed her progress, reviewed her work, and set new goals. But this time the atmosphere was different. There was a sense of anticipation in the air as he motioned for her to take a seat. "You've been doing well," he began, his voice steady and reassuring. "Better than I expected, honestly. I've been watching your progress, and I'm impressed with how quickly you've adapted. You've earned the trust of the team, and you've demonstrated a level of expertise that I don't often see in people just starting out." Her heart swelled at his words. The validation felt like a reward for all the sleepless nights, the early mornings, and the constant self-doubt she had battled since starting this journey. But she couldn't help but feel nervous, wondering what he was going to say next. "I've got a proposition for you," he continued. "There's a major project coming up, a new investment opportunity that we've been working on for months. It's a big deal, and it requires someone who can think outside the box, someone who can see things from a different angle. I think you're the right person for it." She sat up straighter, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "You want me to work on this project? But I'm still so new to all of this." He smiled, a knowing look in his eyes. "That's exactly why I'm asking you. You don't have the biases that the others might have. You approach things with fresh eyes. I think that's going to be an asset." For a moment, she was speechless. This was a turning point. The billionaire wasn't just offering her a task. He was offering her a chance to prove herself on a larger scale. It was a challenge, and it was everything she had worked for. But it was also a huge responsibility. What if she failed? What if her fresh perspective wasn't enough? "You don't have to say yes right away," he said, sensing her hesitation. "Take your time. But I believe in you." The words, "I believe in you," were more than just a reassurance. They were a lifeline. She had spent so much of her life doubting herself, second-guessing her worth, always wondering if she was enough. But now here was someone who saw her potential and was willing to invest in it. The realization hit her hard. This was her chance to prove not only to the billionaire but to herself that she could thrive in this new world. She nodded, her voice steady. "I'll do it. I'll take on the project." The billionaire's eyes gleamed with approval. "I knew you would. Let's get started then." Over the next few weeks, she dove into the project with everything she had. It was intense, demanding, and at times overwhelming. But it also felt like the most exciting challenge she had ever faced. She worked late into the night, meeting with the team, analyzing data, and formulating strategies. There were moments when she thought she might crack under the pressure, but each time she pushed through. She had come too far to back down now. As the project took shape, the waitress began to see the fruits of her labor. The plan she had developed, though unconventional at times, started to resonate with the rest of the team. Her ideas were bold, and though they didn't always align with the traditional approach, they had merit. She had found a way to take the knowledge she had gained from her own life, her struggles, her observations, her ability to understand people, and apply it to the world of finance. It was a perspective that no one else had, and it was starting to make an impact. One day, the billionaire called her into his office again. She felt a mix of excitement and nerves as she walked in, wondering if her progress had been enough. He stood up as she entered, a broad smile on his face. "I wanted to check in with you," he said. "How are you feeling about the project?" "I'm feeling good," she replied, trying to sound confident even though she still had some doubts. "It's challenging, but I think we're on the right track." "I agree," he said, sitting back in his chair. "In fact, I think we're ahead of schedule. Your approach has brought new life to this project, and I'm impressed by how much you've accomplished in such a short amount of time." Her heart skipped a beat. Was he actually saying this? She had worked so hard, and yet she still couldn't fully believe that she had earned this level of praise. She had always seen herself as the underdog, the person who had to prove herself time and time again. But now in this moment it felt like she had truly arrived. "I'm proud of you," he continued. "You've come a long way, and I'm looking forward to seeing where you go from here." The words, "I'm proud of you," hit her harder than anything else. She had heard them from family members, friends, and teachers in the past, but hearing them from him, someone who had built an empire from the ground up, meant more than she could express. It was the validation she had longed for, the recognition that she had always believed was out of her reach. The project was a success, and in the weeks that followed, it became clear that the waitress was no longer just an intern in the office. She had earned her place. Her contributions had made a significant difference, and her future in the company seemed promising. The team that once doubted her now turned to her for guidance, and she had earned the respect of her colleagues. As time went on, the waitress realized that the road ahead was still uncertain. She didn't know where it would take her, but for the first time in her life she was confident that she could navigate it. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a force in the financial world, someone who had proven that with hard work, persistence, and a willingness to take risks, anything was possible. She had taken a leap, and it had paid off.